Joining me now is renewable energy project developer and consultant Peter Kerr. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, Peter, you're neck deep in the energy market here in WA and across the country. There seems to be a myriad of energy infrastructure projects which have been proposed. Obviously, they're not all equal. And it's been reported this week that a proposed offshore wind farm in Victoria that Shell was going to build has been quietly shelved. The federal and Victorian governments have been big on offshore wind power. Why didn't this one make the cut?
I think there are two reasons. The first is, although Shell is one of the biggest energy companies in the world, they're not the leading offshore wind players. So they'll probably beaten to the punch by some of the more experienced types.
Yep.
The second one is that their CEO has recently made a big play about winding back some of Shell's renewable energy ambitions. So I suspect this project was marginal for them.
Okay.
And became surplus to requirements. So, it's still going ahead, but with other bigger players in the offshore wind market.
Fair enough. And still on Victoria, we've seen the Energy Minister, Lily D'Ambrosio. She's moved a little bit on gas, but she still seems to be at odds with her federal counterpart, Madeleine King. That Victorian Labor government has had some pretty strident anti-gas policies in recent years.
Yeah.
How impactful is that, not only for their energy market, but for their economy going forward?
Yeah, look, maybe if I step it back, it's a debate we often hear in the renewable industry. There's no lack of desire to want to move as quickly as you can from fossil fuels to renewable energy. I'm one of those people. But there is a pragmatic part of the industry that acknowledges that gas will be a major part for many years to come of the transition to renewables. And so I think that's where the challenge is. And if you're not planning carefully that transition, you can have unintended consequences, and that is higher gas prices if you're not bringing on supplies, or at least maintaining adequate supplies. And so at the moment, for example, in Victoria, gas prices domestically for industry are at least 50% higher than they are here in Western Australia, and so that goes to the bottom line of businesses. So I think no one disagrees with the idea of getting to renewable energy or a largely renewable system, but how do you get there is the challenge. Yeah.
And is that then an issue, definitely obviously for Victoria in this particular circumstances, because there still seems to be that bit of political friction and political angst about it, particularly given the way they've demonised gas in recent times, but more broadly in Australia. Is that something that we need to consider across the country? How much gas do we need? How much new gas do we need? And how long are we going to need it for?
Yeah, so the trick, if you talk to the pragmatic part of the industry, and I'm not just talking, the fossil fuel industry. Sure. So there's a group in Western Australia called the Sustainable Energy Network. So they are hand on heart. They want to get as fast as they can to renewable energy. Their modelling, and most modelling, pragmatic modelling, will say you can get to renewables of about 80 to 90% of your system pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The last 10% is pretty hard, right? And it will be hard for decades. Mm-hmm. And so rather than having the debate about, gas, should we not have it, let's go as hard as we can on renewables, get to 80 or 90%, and then let's deal with the 10% problem later. But in the interim, we're burning less coal and extra gas, yes, but it overall is a better outcome because you're racing towards renewables. And I think, yes, gas has been demonised and it can be a very effective part of an overall balanced energy system.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose there's an ancillary issue to that around the discussion of having more and new gas supplies coming on. Yep. Obviously, the Federal Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, is talking about a national EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. To what extent do you think that, adding that extra regulation and potentially that extra delay could make, that process more difficult and that 10% at the end more difficult?
Yeah, look, I think it's not just environmental approvals. It is a range of approvals, whether it's a network access approval, whether it's a community development approval, whether it's environmental heritage. They all layer on top of each other. So at the moment in Australia, you're generally, even for the best planned wind farms, from go, an idea through to sending electricity out on the grid, it's about 7 to 10 years, which is too long.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think there are some concerns about the complexity of the development process, and this may at the margin add to it. So I think there are some suggestions, and, I'd be one of those that would welcome a reconsideration of the holistic nature of this layering of approvals on renewable projects.
Yeah, right. And onto Labor's future Made in Australia policy, we know that there is very much centred around fast-tracking the transition and removing some of those national security issues which sit around foreign manufacturing. To what extent do you think that policy can actually work, and will that production and manufacturing be able to occur without government subsidy?
Look, probably the thing to say is that every bit helps. And more broadly, that initiative is actually quite small in the scheme of things. So at the margin, I think it helps. I don't think domestically production is necessarily going to succeed without subsidies, and I think that's the government's intent. The thing to say is that Australia has always been a trading nation. We've relied on imports and exports. That's who we are, just by the nature of our geography. And so we are always going to rely on some form of assistance.
Sure.
I don't think you can do it all at home. The notion, however, and this is where renewables get you, the notion that you might take more control of your energy supplies rather than, say, having to import oil is a good long-term notion.
Yeah.
And so, look, it's a small piece. I don't think it's going to be either a huge blocker or a huge, enabler, other than to say it is support in the right direction.
Yeah, rightio. Yeah. Now, lastly, onto nuclear, and the CSIRO has gone back to the drawing board this week. They were asked to redo their homework
poor CSIRO.
by the coalition. Look, I think most people wouldn't disagree that the moratorium could come off, and can we at least talk about it? Like whether you actually go ahead and have nuclear power, I think is step 2. But I think most people would say, well, we should at least be able to talk about it. Yeah. Is there a world where nuclear, either in the large-scale form or the small-scale form, can work in Australia?
In Australia, I don't see it financially stacking up, given the advantages we have around renewable energy and gas. I just don't think, and we've not got a big market. It definitely will play a part in industries and countries where they're pre-existing, absolutely. So I'm not against it. I think the challenge is a little bit that it's a distraction in Australia. It will take at least 20 years from the start to get something up. So, look, I don't disagree with the premise, I guess. What's the harm in at least planning for maybe plan C? If you need it in 2050, well, let's at least start now having those conversations. I think, we only have to look at the waste dump issue in Australia. We've been unable to resolve that for 30, 40 years. Yep. So these are long duration things.
But we are going to have to sort it out for AUKUS. So that conversation
so that conversation needs to start. And look, so I 100%. Why not have a genuine conversation? I guess the trick is not to pretend like it's in the next 20 years in terms of energy, or it's the panacea. But look, it may in the future be a long-term need, but let's not get distracted right now. But you can chew gum and walk at the same time, right? Like, so there you go.
Excellent insights. Thank you so much, Peter.